Joining us now is Stephen Komarow. Stephen is the Vice President and News Director of CQ Roll Call, which covers Congress, the Congressional Quarterly. And Stephen, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
So let me ask you, since you cover Congress, Congress has left for its August recess as of a couple weeks, or about 10 days ago, and they're not too popular with the public nowadays. People feel they're not getting enough done, according to the polls. What didn't they get done before they left for that August recess?
Oh gosh, there's how much time do you have on the show?
The broad view, overview.
It's been a tough year to get bills done. With Republicans controlling both the House and the Senate, one of the big goals of the year was to carry out Congress's most solemn constitutional authority, which is overseeing the spending. And there's 12 appropriations bills, which are all supposed to be done by September 30th. None of them are done, and it doesn't look like any of them will be. Transportation, the transportation bill to fund the highways and everything is way behind schedule. They're patching it together so that construction doesn't stop, but that's still ongoing. We have judgeships and other nominations all backed up. Now, I can't just blame Congress for that. The administration's a little slow in making nominations, but nonetheless, there's plenty sitting around and not getting done. We have, I'm trying to think.
Well, that's a good start. I don't want to put you on the spot with an overbroad question, but okay, then I guess the question a lot of people are going to have in response to that is, well, then what are they doing? What have they been doing? These seem to, probably most folks, and certainly to me, to be pretty fundamental parts of the job description. Pass an appropriation bill, get the highways funded, do all the things you've got to do. It seems to me you take the job that's in the job description. How have they been spending their time up to now?
Well, it's been a very politically divided year, and I think as we get into the election season, the presidential election season, and let's not forget the congressional election season, things only get harder. On those appropriations bills, they got sidetracked after the Democrats had put in some language banning the Confederate flag from federal lands. And the Republicans, late at night, tried to slip a couple of amendments back in so that you could still put Confederate flags in certain situations on federal lands. We're talking about cemeteries and things like that. And that brought the whole process to a stop because it would have made for some uncomfortable votes for people. And we're waiting on that. On the highways, an important thing, the issue comes back to taxes. You have so many Republicans who have a no-tax pledge that they couldn't find a way to fund the highways. The traditional way, the way most highways get funded from the federal level is with a gasoline tax, as you know. Well, it hasn't been raised in like 30 years, and because of that, with inflation and everything else, it's just inadequate to do that. And so they're trying to figure out another way to fund it because nobody wants to vote for a gas tax increase and then have people back home be mad that they're paying another 20 cents a gallon or whatever it might be.
Right. So basically, very little has gotten done. And whenever we hear, those of us who follow politics a little bit, whenever we hear that funding bills haven't been passed, we have memories of years past where there were showdowns in these areas, and in fact, even threats of government closure. If you go back far enough, some of us remember the Gingrich years. So what's the likelihood, in your view, that we might be facing another government shutdown in the next few months?
Well, I think it's possible. Like I said, the fiscal year ends September 30th. There's no way they're going to get the spending bills done that let the government keep operating. What they'll probably do is pass what's called a continuing resolution, which basically lets the money to continue to flow at the last year's levels without changing any policies much or anything else. But that isn't going to last forever, and there's a lot of talk of a showdown when we get close to Christmas time. And, if things get all hung up, you could see a government shutdown. There are already people asking the question, is defunding Planned Parenthood worth the government shutdown? Because that might be one of the issues that blocks Republicans from voting for a spending bill to keep the year going.
Well, so we may be in for some interesting weeks coming up. And we're talking with Stephen Komarow, who is Vice President and News Director of CQ Roll Call. And Stephen, what about cybersecurity? Is cybersecurity legislation going to come up for a vote? We've had a number of famous breaches now. We had Anthem, and we had Target, we had Sony, which was huge, and now, of course, Ashley Madison, although I'm not sure that a lot of people in Congress are going to want to mention that. But,
well, it is a Canadian company, so I think they'll just avoid that one.
All right, okay, good. Just as well. But nevertheless, it shows that data on the Internet are insecure. It's certainly a huge reminder of that. So are they going to move on that, you think?
I think there's a chance. There are bills in the House and Senate, and the two chambers have been working together. There's a real tension there, though, between having the government step into a bigger role and those who want to keep the government out of it. In addition, big companies don't like to cooperate on this that much because of competition. A lot of companies, as we've seen, even once they're breached, they don't want to admit it. And if they start telling each other when they're breached, there could be some advantage there. I think maybe the tide has turned, and people realize that everybody's got to get together and deal with this. I'll be curious to see that one as it plays out. I would interject that the schedule's pretty heavy with other tough issues that take attention away from that. For example, we have the Iran nuclear deal.
I was going to get to that. Absolutely. So, but let's jump ahead to it. We're talking with Stephen Komarow of CQ Roll Call. Okay, let's talk about Iran for a second. Now, what are the prospects? We have some high visibility Democratic defections, particularly Chuck Schumer. We have some other people in the House on the Democratic side who were considered possible defections who did not, like Gerald Nadler of New York. What do you think? What are the possibilities that this deal is going to go through? I know it's complicated, but what is the likelihood that we will see this agreement ratified and become law?
September 16th is the deadline for Congress to vote to kill it if that's what's going to happen. Congress doesn't really ratify it; has a chance to kill it.
Okay.
And right now it's pretty close. In the Senate, where you can count votes pretty well, it looks like there are about 30 senators who would sustain a veto if the president, if the Senate votes, House and Senate vote to send a bill to kill the deal. If it gets to the president, he'll veto it. So it's really going to come down to being a veto fight. And the president, as you know, under the Constitution, if more than a third side with the president, he wins. Right now, they're up to about 30 votes in the Senate, which is just four shy of a lock for him, for the president winning. I'd say there's a pretty good chance he'll get those. The House is harder to count, but when you have people like Gerald Nadler coming out in favor of the deal, that might give the president enough Democrats to sustain the veto in the House, in which case it won't even make it to the Senate.
Right. Although you also do have Nita Lowey of New York coming out against it, so so there will be a lot to watch when they come back. Anything before we say goodbye? Anything we haven't brought up that people should be looking for when Congress comes back in session next month?
Well, I think there'll be some good theater when the Pope comes. He's speaking to a joint meeting, to be technically correct, of Congress on the 24th. And this is a Pope who's spoken out on issues that, by coincidence, are before the Congress, things like the environment. So we'll be watching to see if Pope Francis scolds the Congress for not doing enough on the environment. That could be pretty interesting.
Well, I wish I could score a ticket for that one. And we'll have to leave it there. Stephen Komarow is the Vice President and News Director of CQ Roll Call. Stephen, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.